Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm calling to order the Select Board meeting on April 21st, 2024 at 12:33 p.m. This meeting is being held in person and/or remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone else recording the meeting? Okay. For the record, participating this afternoon, myself, Liz Klein, Chair, Joe Fisher, and Bill Ramsey is on Zoom with us. If you're willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is discussion of warrant Article 11, transfer to the reserve fund. Tom, do you want to start?
So Michelle will walk us through the first few, and then I'll jump in towards the end.
Okay, great. Okay.
And
Oh, Anne, come on up. Thank you for being here.
Sure. So this year, this is a perennial article at town meeting, and we typically ask for some funds from unassigned fund balance to replenish the reserve fund towards the end of the fiscal year. This year, our request is $468,533. It's significantly less than the last few years, which is good. And then the main categories that we're seeing this year are information technology, so IT. This is based on two things. There was additional cost for Munis training. We did a big upgrade, the first upgrade we've done in a decade to our financial system, and so we purchased some training days, which has been really helpful as we've had different staff transitions. And then the second piece of that is there was an ongoing operating cost for the body-worn cameras that the police department purchased in the last year, and we've built that cost into the FY25 budget. We got a grant to buy those, but there was kind of this gap of FY24 where we needed to cover some of the operating expenses that the grant didn't cover all of the way. So that's IT. Fire, we're estimating about $450,000 primarily to overtime costs that are, and the chief's here to add details, but there's a number of reasons that that's been pushed up. We have folks who are out on injury leave, sick leave, as well as people taking parental leave and other things going on there in the department. So although he's got some vacancies, there are still shifts that are required to be covered, and that raises the cost of doing that on overtime. We also have the legal budget. We're requesting $269,000 there. We've included a breakdown in your packets to just kind of go through what we've spent to date in the four main areas, and then what we're estimating through the end of the year. And in all of these numbers, we include a bit of a buffer just to make sure that we are not short, because anything that we don't use through this reserve fund transfer process will be returned to fund balance at the end of the year. There are two items in here, workers' compensation and unemployment, that we also think are going to be short. These are really hard to predict. What Ann and I did there was kind of look at the run rate of what we have paid out in recent weeks and months and estimated that through the end of the year for those two categories. Town meeting, since we've moved to a different type of audiovisual services that we're providing, we are short this year. We have to plan for 2 nights, even though we're not sure if it will go for 2 nights, and that drives up the cost for providing those AV services. And then the printing of the warrant gets more expensive every year. So we are looking at $42,000 there for town meeting that we're estimating may need to be transferred. The last category just came up on Friday, and Tom will speak to this more, but that involves some emergency repairs at Town Hall that happened 2 days ago.
So we had an emergency happen with our electrical panel, caused between $10,000 and $20,000 worth of damage that needs to be replaced. We already have the quotes. I'll be doing, that just happened Friday night. So I'll be doing a postmortem on that tomorrow with the maintenance team, the custodial team, and the...
I think your mic's on.
With the custodial team as well as the electricians. So we'll be doing that tomorrow.
Okay. Is your mic on, Tom?
It is now.
So overall, our financial policy, it calls for budgeting 0.75% of our operating budget as this reserve fund. We only used that once this year so far for about $7,000. If you recall, there was some basement flooding in Town Hall when I think a pipe burst. So estimating what we see coming up for this compared to the budget, that leaves the shortfall of about $468,000.
That includes a contingency,
Yes.
The $50,000 contingency that we've identified. Again, this is for the next 2.5 months, and we're, we just had this Friday night as a good example of the kind of thing that can happen anytime.
Right.
So I'm just glad that happened Friday and not next Friday.
We'd rather be more conservative and return that money to fund balance if we don't need to use it than find ourselves, with a deficit that we're trying to cover at the end of the year.
Right. You said 0.75% of the operating budget. Can you just say that again?
So our financial policy calls for budgeting the reserve fund every year at 0.75%
Okay.
of the operating budget. So that was what we started with, that $734,000, which we have largely not touched so far. So you kind of start with that, you anticipate what might be coming up, and then if it's not enough to cover it, that's the shortfall that we're asking for.
Okay.
So the 468 plus the 734 gives us the 1.2 million.
That's right.
Yep.
And the other thing I'd just note is a bunch of these categories are shared expenses, workers' compensation, unemployment, some things like that are shared items between the school department and the town.
Okay. Okay, so that would be workers' comp and unemployment would be the two that are
In
shared?
theory, town meeting, in
Sure.
theory, IT, there are crossovers in a lot of different places.
Okay.
So to the extent we're able to keep everything funded,
Okay, but not legal, correct?
not legal, they have their own legal support.
Okay. Do you have any questions, Joe?
Well, just two questions or comments. The first one is that fire is the largest at 450,000, and I know the chief is here. What are we doing to manage that? Because that's a big one.
Hi, Joe. So to answer that question, Michelle kind of commented on it, that this, as long as I've been involved in administration of the fire, this is a very complicated thing to figure out what our actual overtime rates should be. There's so many different variables. Michelle alluded to some of them, that extended injury leave, extended sick leave, and then a big one that we're finding the last few years is we have a young staff, and a lot of them are having children, both men and women, and, especially...
I think only the women are having the children. Maybe the men are sharing in the parental
Correct.
responsibilities.
Yes. And so what we're seeing now that we did not see years ago is use of FMLA leave.
Yep.
And in certain cases, they're taking the full 12 weeks, to be home and assist with the caregiving and everything else. So that's something that we never saw years ago. And that is impacting us because, if we drop below the minimum on that shift, then we have to hire overtime for it. So even though last year, the override approved 4 additional firefighters,
Right.
We still haven't been able to hire them. So we have that salary, but it's still, this is, there's unforeseen expenses every year that are very difficult to anticipate and budget for. So,
But if I was to summarize it,
Yeah.
would it be fair to say that this is primarily due to short staffing? That we don't have, okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yep.
And I know you're actively looking to
We
address
are,
that.
and we actually are interviewing one candidate on Tuesday. We have a few other candidates that expressed that they would be coming in to submit their applications this week. So we are actively working on it. We have another new hire that starts, I think it's actually later this week or early next week as well, and then starts at the Fire Academy in the end of April, beginning of May.
So I have another comment on legal, but I don't know if Bill wanted to talk about fire before we let the chief go.
No questions on fire. I do have a question for Tom, though. Tom, the cause of the damage to the generator, I think you said, do we know what that was? Was it a power surge or?
Yeah, no, we don't know yet, Bill. It sounds like it was just the switches that were there are original to the building, to when the remodel was done. So it's 30 years old. So they seem to think it was just an age related issue, which brings up another question about all the rest of the, the rest of the equipment down there. So that's what I'm doing that meeting tomorrow to ascertain the exact cause and the likelihood of a problem going forward.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So one other comment that concerns the reserve transfer with respect to legal. The select board is currently contemplating whether or not we should be appealing the Riverstone decision. And my understanding is that included in these numbers would be the fees that would be, the estimated fees that would be incurred if in fact we move forward with the appeal. That's right. So I know we'll be addressing that shortly, but I just want to make sure we have the funds for that.
That's right.
Great. Nothing else.
Okay. And Michelle, I know you spoke about town meeting. So is this for planning for the second night?
Yeah, so some of that is, especially for the audio visuals, there's a
Okay.
large cost of that in there where we can't tell the folks like at 11 o'clock on Wednesday night that they're not needed for Thursday because they've reserved the people and the equipment for that time. So we're essentially preventing them from taking on a different job. So,
Okay.
and Tom and I have talked, if for whatever reason we did need to go to the second night, we have to have that lined up or else we wouldn't be able to have the meeting.
Yeah.
So that is a big piece of it.
Okay.
But I think our budget still is kind of catching up to the level of services that we're providing. And we had been budgeting for, one night, a smaller space. And I think we might need to look at that again in the future if we're going to always have to plan for a second night.
Okay.
I think I said, I'm not crazy about the cost either. I think I said to Michelle that if we ended up having a second night and we didn't budget for it and we didn't plan for it, I wasn't looking forward to telling Mr. Puzo that.
Right. So for FY '25, I think we budgeted 50,000.
For
So, wait,
Don't line
or do you know how much we budgeted for FY '24? This is 42 in addition to,
that's in addition to, so the total budget was 60,000 for FY '24. And then we're projecting it to be closer to 102, and that's where the 42 is coming from. The cost of the warrant's gone up significantly, so that's when
Yikes.
we had
Okay.
budgeted 22,000 for printing, and the warrant was 34,000. I know that's come up in the advisory discussions as well of, do we as a town want to continue per the bylaw to mail a copy to every household?
Yeah.
Do we want to look at another option where we have some copies available in town hall, the library, the Center for Active Living?
And people could sign up and have them delivered to people who want them.
yeah, okay.
I mean, I know many people who'd be interested in getting it electronically. They'll have it on their iPad,
Right.
and that's all they need.
Yeah,
And it's always on our website,
Right.
and we send out email blasts, but that's when, 34,000 is a significant piece of that
Right.
budget. So that's something that we would need to do an article next year to change the approach. Right now, the bylaw gives us two options: mail it to every household or print the whole thing in a newspaper, but there isn't really one of kind of general circulation, and I'm not sure that would be cheap either. The warrant's
Right.
like 100-something pages. So something that we may want to think about next year.
yeah, I think so. Let's put that on the list to evaluate for next year. It seems like the costs are escalating.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any
And
other?
I'm sorry, just one last point, just
Sure.
so the public knows, and I think you guys know, everything we do here is done through a procurement process. So
Yes.
all of these expenses have gone through an RFP issuance and responses. So there's no, we're not just, funneling this to one person. with
Right.
Astronomical costs.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Just don't want the public thinking.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Bill, did you want to add anything? Okay.
No, I like the idea of possibly discussing not sending the warrant out to every 34,000 households that we have. I think that's a good idea. So appreciate you bringing that up. That's all.
Okay, any questions or comments from members of the public? Okay,
Then I would move to recommend favorable action on Article 11.
Second.
roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Excellent, thank you. Next on the agenda is agreement with EDM Studio for design services to assist with the feasibility study and conceptual design for the Hingham Center for Active Living.
Tom, do we have anyone from EDM here?
Yep.
Oh, they have to be allowed in, probably. Thanks, Chief. They're not presenting though, correct?
No, they're just there to answer questions.
Okay, do you want to kick us off, Tom?
Sure. So the town, or the select board, a number of months ago, did an evaluation of different sites available in town for siting a potential new center for active living, or the senior center. 2 sites were selected as a focus point. We subsequently designed and issued a request for proposal or request for qualifications from a design firm or design firms. We walked through that process. We had 4 total applicants. 3 were qualified or met the base qualifications. We interviewed all 3 with a review team that was made up of people from the Senior Center Building Committee, my staff, the director of the Center for Active Living, and myself and Art. So we walked through that whole process, and after the 3 interviews were completed, we selected as the preferred candidate a company called EDM Studio, and we're recommending, we've since negotiated the contract based on the scope of services provided for in the RFQ, and we're recommending a contract with EDM as presented tonight.
Great. And the Center for Active Living Building Committee was involved in this process
were.
as well? Okay, great. Thank you. I know you're the liaison, Joe. Do you want to add anything?
Well, just, I also understand the Council on Aging was involved in this.
That they've been informed all along the way. Former COA member who had direct knowledge of the program sat in on the interviews, so yes.
And do we have the representative from EDM?
Yeah.
I'm looking, I just don't see their image here.
I think the view is just hiding them because their cameras aren't on.
But they're able to, they can hear you.
And who's here from representing EDM?
Is Tim.
There he is.
Both Chris and Tim.
Oh, hi, good
Hi,
to meet you
welcome.
both.
Hi, guys.
Everybody.
So I had the time, and Tim made the time for a lengthy discussion yesterday, I think it was, and I asked a number of pointed questions. They were all answered satisfactorily. Very pleased that EDM would be the group that we'd be working with. But we did have some questions about the scope of work, and we wanted to consider whether or not the contract covers that scope of work or whether or not we need to expand it. And the specific question that we were looking at is the contract is focused on Building 12 over at Bear Cove Park as well as Town Hall. And if in fact you do a preliminary assessment of Building 12 and you say, that's really not a good location, but a building next door, a property next door looks like it could be promising. Do you have the ability to give us that advice and actually to look at that other building under the scope of this contract? And if you don't, I'd like to consider whether or not we can expand the contract to allow you to look beyond Building 12 at Bear Cove Park.
Chris, do you want to take that?
Sure. So the scope right now in the proposal and the contract limits us to the 2 sites. So that's kind of what we have in our fee and in the time allotted for the project. We can certainly expand it to accommodate more than 2 sites. We've done that for other municipalities. It all depends on how many sites you guys want us to look at. So if you want us to put in a line item for, if we do want to expand it to study 3 sites, we can certainly go down that road as well and, provide that information. If we want to provide 4, we can do that. It just all depends on how far you guys want us to take it.
So, I guess the way we're looking at it is the first site is not limited to the existing senior center, it's limited to Town Hall. So it's beyond that, and we're considering the second site as Bear Cove, and it's limited to a specific building. We're not saying that you'd be going to another site outside of Bear Cove Park. But if there's something that's right there, I think this is something that we should discuss, Bill and Liz, whether or not we can have a provision in the contract saying if the select board so requests, you would look at another site within Bear Cove Park, and obviously to the extent that involves additional costs, you'd give us a proposal on those costs.
Yeah, that works, and I guess right now the bulk of the effort for studying an additional site, or an additional location, even if it's within an existing site, would just be if we were to be requested to do an additional conceptual design. If there was a request to do conceptual design for a third location, that's where kind of the bulk of the effort would be. But we can certainly look at, and as we're studying Bear Cove specifically, if there is an additional parcel within the site that we look at tangentially and say, hey, that's actually a really good site, we think we should study that a little bit more. We could certainly do that, but currently, like you're saying, that's not in the current proposal.
I mean, it's not a trivial example, but a modified example may be that there's an adjacent parcel that says, hey, parking would be really good there. We're doing building 12, but we can make it work if we look at the parking expanded, but it would be literally outside of the building 12 site, and we want to make sure that would be part of the assessment.
Yeah, I think that would be reasonable. If we're looking at just designing the building in the current location of building 12, and we say, hey, we want to look at putting the parking, across the way or down down one of those little access roads a little bit, I think that would probably, we could include that as part of the current scope of work. I don't think that's a big deal.
So I think, at least where I'm at, is that we hold off accepting this contract, but instead ask you and our council to make that contract change. So if in fact the situation arises, we can expand your scope.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Joe. I guess from my perspective, we certainly we don't want you on this wild goose chase around Bear Cove Park, but if you get to building 12 and you know instantly this is not a good idea, we want to know that and have kind of a communication avenue for you to let us know that early in the process before we go too far down the road with the conceptual design.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll have checkpoints along the way where there's kind of initial thoughts, and then there's diagrams, and before we go too far. So we'll have milestones along the way where we'll be able to give you guys a gut check of, yeah, this is just not going to work.
Okay,
100% it's not going to work. Or yeah, we think we should study a little bit more. Let's keep going down this path. So yeah, we'll definitely be communicating, with the building committee, with the select board, with all the stakeholders along the way at multiple points.
Great. And I know you mentioned community outreach as well. How does that work?
So we actually need to sit down with kind of what we're going to call the leadership group, which is basically our point of contact for the town, and develop a plan. But what we have in our scope of work right now is kind of a three-pronged approach. We'll develop a survey, which will kind of cast the widest net. So we have a list of questions, and we'll work through the questions with the team that we're working with, and we'll submit that fairly early on in the process, probably within a month and a half or so, and then parallel to that, we'll start to work up our second and third prong of the approach, which would be we call it Ask an Architect event. So we'll set up a day at the senior center where myself and a member of the team will be set up at the senior center for the entire day, and we'll set up different stations where we can talk about different things in different parts of the project. Where are people coming from? How do you guys use the center? What do you like? What do you dislike? And just kind of talk directly to the members, and hopefully work with Jennifer to advertise that so as many participants as possible come and participate. And then the third piece, after that kind of Ask an Architect and after the survey responses, we'd set up focus groups, 1 or 2 focus groups, depending on the responses that we get, and we would be specifically reaching out to the folks that we didn't hear from during those first 2 efforts, trying to get as many opinions and as many people as possible. So if there's a specific demographic that we didn't get a good response from, we'd work with Jennifer and Tom and other members of the town and try to reach out and find those people and grab 5 to 10 to 15 of those participants and try to lure them into a focus group, and ask them a lot of the same questions that we asked during the survey and during the Ask an Architect event. So the whole point is to try to get as many people and as many eyes on the project as possible up front and get as much feedback as possible while we're kind of working through the study process and gathering information.
Excellent. Bill, do you have any questions or comments?
You're off, Bill.
You're on Milt.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think, I think to Joe's point is if 12 doesn't work, I think we would like you to lift and shift focus to another building in the vicinity of 12 as a potential. So, for example, this 80, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the park, right? So there's another building close to 12 that could work. But I think Joe's point about, hey, we ran the 12 to ground, that's not going to go, that's not going to work with what we need, but there are other buildings in the area where we may be able to lift and shift focus to that would work.
Right.
So I guess I think Joe's point's a good one, and I think that's where he was going with that. But thank you.
And I would add, Bill and I have, during the summer, there is a dunk tank. And so it won't just be ask the architect, we could dunk the architect as well, and it would attract a lot of attention. So
As long as it's warm out, I'm up for it.
We can't promise that.
I know we've got a 1 o'clock coming up.
I know. We have a 1 o'clock meeting. So is everybody okay if we delay this vote till, our next meeting is April 30th? Does that give you enough time to work on the contract?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. We should be able to put something together this coming week.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you for being here. We're excited to work with you and get started.
Yeah, thanks all for the
Thank you, guys.
opportunity. We're excited.
Excellent.
Very nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right, next on the agenda is to attend and participate in the moderators meeting in preparation for the 2024 annual town meeting. It is a different location in Zoom. So can we move and then we adjourn?
We'll adjourn after the.
After that.
So just recess now.
Okay, we're going to take recess and change rooms. Thank you, everybody.